Okay, so now we'll jump ahead again to the 18th century quickly, to a man by the name of Levi, Levi, Yitzhak, Yitzhak. It's all, a rough translation into English or transliteration into English anyway. Levi Yitzhak, who was an East European rabbi, and thrived in a time when much of Judaism, we'll say at least partly due to Moses Maimonides' influence over the centuries, had become increasingly rationalistic, we'll say, in its studies and writing and argumentation. One could show mastery of the law and be quite good at it, and maybe not have much of a heart for it or a heart for God. That at least is what Levi Yitzhak felt. And he's among the founders of what's called the Hasidic movement, Hasidic. A person who's part of this movement would be a Hasid, Hasid. This term is derived from the Hebrew word for righteous, Zadik, Zadik. And so, let's see, he helped start this Hasidic movement, which was basically a pietistic reaction against over rationalization of religion. That's not all it was, but it was certainly that. It was based in the mystical ideas that we talked about in class the other day, especially Isaac Luria's idea that God had made a sort of a miscalculation in creating the world by filling all the vessels or objects of creation with divine glory, in order to give them existence, really, basically, but underestimating the power of God, of God's own glory, or underestimating the ability of these created objects to handle that glory, such that the world got shattered and all of its objects basically got messed up, right? And that explains the world in which we live, where nothing fits right, and there's evil and suffering and sorrow and sin. So, with that kind of mystical background, Levi Yitzhak was among these teachers who tried to put a popular spin on this in this sense. They taught their followers that it was their responsibility to help to mend the world. Remember the phrase tikkun olam. And the way in which the world is to be mended is by very heartfelt obedience to the laws of the Torah, but doing it with a burning heart of love for God and for other people. This isn't cold obedience. This is a festive, celebrative, heartfelt love that could mend those vessels or those objects of creation, because the divine spark is still kind of in those shattered vessels, and only through concentrated love and prayer and kindness, doing good to others, those sparks are sort of the world sort of gets put back together right in such a way that it can handle the divine glory better than that first time around. This is healing the world. Levi Yitzhak, by the way, was almost an exact contemporary of John Wesley, And I wrote a paper on the two of them back in my doctoral work, comparing their emphasis on a heart filled with love for God. Both of them emphasized that and that it should touch our emotions. Both of them were reacting, certainly to some extent, to what they believed was the over rationalism of their respective traditions. Levi Yitzhak in Judaism of Eastern Europe of that time, John Wesley in the Church of England at roughly the same time. And they both definitely were leaders in what we might call revitalization movements within their traditions. They didn't start new religions or any such thing, but they did bring a renewed emphasis on heartfelt and emotive aspects of devotion. So Levi Yitzhak, by the way, I learned of him. Uh, I was in my doctoral work at Emory University, and at that point in my this was just starting my second semester, and I thought I was going to do my doctoral dissertation work in Christianity and Buddhism. I really wanted to kind of do some kind of work in that area. And I signed up for a class, though, called Theological Writing, a seminar. And I thought, well, yeah, theological writing. I like writing and I like theology. And who is this Blumenthal guy anyway? Well, it was a great class, great seminar. And the Blumenthal was David Blumenthal, a conservative rabbi, or a rabbi in the conservative stream of Judaism at any rate. And he was at the time writing a book on Levi Yitzhak. I now have that book, of course, but at the time it was manuscripts. And what we did in that seminar is we would read one or two of his chapters for each week, and also then have to write a paper in some kind of response to what David Blumenthal had written. That was so much fun. I learned so much. It was really my real introduction to Judaism, certainly to mystical Judaism. It was about the time I took that class that I could look back on that previous semester that I told you about and go, oh, Roberta was right about Buber, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. So I love that class, made a big difference in my life. That man really became truly a rabbi figure to me in so many ways. David Blumenthal, still with us. He's getting up there now. So Levi Yitzhak and this tradition called Hasidism, and it's still alive and well. They're I don't know that they're quite all as wrapped up in sort of like inexpressible joy and heartfelt love as Levi Yitzhak was. That's kind of a hard thing to sustain over the generations. But Hasidism is still definitely an important tradition within Judaism, with some mystical roots. Now, I'm going to shift quickly to Martin Buber, born in the late 19th century, died in the 1960s, lived through the Holocaust, of course, was a good friend of Franz Rosenzweig, of whom you've now heard, and who was quoted a couple times in the prayer book in that additional stuff on the left-hand side. I saw Rosenzweig got a couple of call-outs, and I hope that some of you noticed that. Well, Buber, as you know, is best known for his book, whose German title is Ich und Du. Most simply, I and you is just the best way to. It's just I and you. It's I and thou. It sounds a little too stilted, King James-ish religious, and he wasn't talking about anything like that. It's I and you. Now, a very quick overview of that book. God is what Buber calls the eternal you. You is second person, right? If I say you, I'm talking to somebody, to you. I'm not talking about because I'm talking to you. If I talk about you, I talk about you in the third person. He or she said this or that, right? And so the whole idea is I and you is about this kind of relationship. He has another book of essays that I really love called Between. It's called Between Man and Man. Hopefully today he'd say Between Human and Human, but it's the same idea between the human two human beings. And he's actually quoting from, I think it's the book of Ezekiel, where at one point God is characterized as saying something to the effect that what I most care about is that which is between the human and the human, the space between, the space of relationship. So I and you is one form of relationship. It's the one in which I am truly who I am because I'm truly, will say, allowing you to be who you are rather than projecting upon you my expectations or my interpretations or my judgments. I'm, to the best of my ability, allowing you simply to be you in all of your you-ness and otherness to me. Obviously, we'd say a whole lot more. Now, God is the eternal you, meaning even though we might think we can talk about God, when we talk about God, it's no longer God, because God is the eternal you, the one who can only be truly talked about by being talked to. The only, in other words, the only, Buber would say, the only truly legitimate language, theological language, is the language of prayer. Now, I'm trying to open up some ginger ale and making a little bit of a mess. Sorry. Okay, back to the. I'm all askew, aren't I? All askew. Not a tad askew. I'm atrociously askew. In this book, the main thing I want to communicate with you that often is missed, by the way, on the other end of the spectrum are what he calls I-it relations. And I-it is where I look at whatever I'm looking at, whether it's an object, a person, a book, it doesn't matter. I'm objectifying it. I'm looking at it for what it means to me. I'm imposing my expectations, my hopes, my predispositions, my desires onto this thing as a way of somehow perpetuating me. That's I-it, right? I-thou can be, or I-you can be a relationship to all kinds of things, as can I-it. But he did say the one you can never actually objectify God because it's impossible. Because God is the eternal you. Okay, now in that book, I and Thou, I and You, Ik Undu, Buber says there are three spheres of relation. Three spheres of relation. It's noteworthy that relation to God is not one of the spheres. The spheres are our relationship to other human beings. The next sphere is to non-human animals. He talks about a cat early on. I would be predisposed to talk about dogs and specifically Coco, my girl that's over there. She just follows me around. She doesn't know any better. Um, but then there's a third sphere. So you have human beings, non-human animals, and then basically works of art, art, literature, music, and it's kind of surprising, but interesting too that he says these three spheres of human relation. When we approach the other human being, or if it's a dog, or a sculpture, we'll say. And we work hard. Yeah, he says when grace and will are joined, divine grace is part of this, but so is human will. That we strive to put ourselves in a position of receptivity to the other, to allow this other to speak to us as from its own center rather than what I might expect of it or desire of it. And when that happens, God, the eternal you, shines through in each of these spheres of relation. So again, God is not a distinct sphere of relation. And this is where it ties in a little bit to the Hasidic or mystical idea of there's this divine presence that's within the world. It's up to the human to sort of help mend the world and get that divine presence and creation rightly reoriented again. Obviously, he's putting a new existentialist spin on it, but Buber was definitely drawing on this mystical tradition. So this is an interesting idea. Our relationship to other people, our relationship to other living creatures that are not humans, and then our relationship to books, music, sculptures, with the idea, a book is an object. Let's think about a book for a minute. And he wrote a book. He wrote a book called I and You. Now, that book is itself an it, right? It's an object. Buber says the hope for any great artist or producer of something along this line is that the beholder, the reader, the viewer will take that receptive mode such that I, as the reader, am addressed. I don't simply consume the work of art. I find a way to allow that thing to speak to me, to be passive to its message, to its presence. And Buber says again, when that happens, the eternal you is also present, streaming in that sphere of relation. It's a remarkable book. I haven't read it now for several years, but I think I've read it 7 or 8 times in my life. And fortunately, I still have my original copy that I bought at a bookstore in Nampa, Idaho, when I was in college. And fortunately, I was going to say, every time I've read it, I've used a different pen, color, or marker. When I first started, I used markers to mark every time through. So I have like this coded thing. I actually went back and figured out what year that was. And so I've got this whole coded thing in my book for all the times I've read it. And it is an amazing journey. I recommend it to all of you, but know that the first time through, my image I recall when I was reading it the first time through was I felt like I was out like in this ocean, just drowning, all kinds of ideas and words. Just I was barely keeping alive. And then every now and then I'd find like a little piece of wood, to hang on to for a while, and that would be like a sentence that I think I really understood that sentence. And but with each reading, it became more and more, I will just say, accessible to me. I hope it didn't become objectified by me. I don't think it has. And the beauty of it is, if Buber was right, every time I read it in the right way, or anybody else, in the proper openness to allowing it to speak to me, not only is God present, but in a real way, so is Martin Buber.